Hey, welcome to Worship Launch, where it is our goal to equip worship leaders to build healthier teams. My name is Zach Dietz, and today, man, I'm excited about today's topic. We're going to be covering 4 different things. We're going to talk about my pastor's leadership style. We're going to talk about if the Bible gives us any insight into a worship pastor, senior pastor relationship, what things and qualities our pastor looks for when he's hiring, and then we're going to talk about our relationship a little bit. So I want to introduce to you right now my pastor. This is Michael Gabbert, or should I say Dr. Michael Gabbert. But man, I can't say enough about my pastor. I love him, and I'm just honored that we get to do this today. And so let's dive right in. Michael, I want to start with and just ask you if you can talk a little bit about your leadership style with your staff and why you approach it the way you do.
Yeah, and I appreciate you inviting me to be on the podcast. I'm glad that we're able to do this and provide it for people.
Yeah.
My leadership style is the opposite of a micromanager. I believe God has called me to set a direction for the church, to find the vision and set a course. But as we've assembled a team here, one of the things that I've looked for in every position is a person that has initiative. They not only have expertise in their area of ministry, but they don't stand around waiting for me to give them daily direction of what to do. I want people who can see how God is at work here, what's unfolding in the lives of people, and they can go and do their job. So my job is to identify giftedness. It is to push our team toward excellence. But then I step back and let them do their ministry as creatively as they can discover how to do it. You know that we have 2 rules here for our team, and that's been from the very first staff member I ever hired. Our 2 rules are, number 1, don't surprise me. I'm not a micromanager, but keep me in the loop. I want to know what's happening. I want to know what's unfolding, what's going on in the lives of our people, what ministries we're up to. And the second rule is I reserve the right to veto, which means because I have the responsibility of the entire package of what we do as a church, it's my job to make sure that we're not going in 12 different directions at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so as long as I know what we're doing and I can keep us within the parameters of moving in the right direction, I don't want to do everybody else's jobs because they do them better than me.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a good time. I had a bonus question scheduled, and he didn't know about it. So I think I want to insert this here. But so when you were searching for a worship pastor before I came, your search took a while from what I understand. Mm-hmm. And I've loved that about you because I've watched that since I've been here, how you hire anybody on your staff. And I appreciate the fact that you don't rush in to hiring somebody. And I've noticed in a lot of pastors, as soon as one pastor leaves, they're scrambling trying to find somebody. So why is that? Why is it important you to take your time?
Mm-hmm.
And
well, there's a couple of things that go into that. I mean, that's a great question. Part of the reason that you see pastors when they lose a staff member, you see them scramble, like you talk about, because they got to get a committee together and they got to solicit resumes and they've got to make this happen. But the reason they're in that position is because they've created a team that operates as a series of silos. And so when you take a person out of that team, you have an entire area that's just not covered. I mean, it's just not done. And so you've got to get a piece to plug into that empty space so that the team can function. What we've done here is, number one, we don't use committees to hire people. The hiring process is really God just, I pray about it. I seek the Lord, I listen to the Spirit, and He inevitably brings me across the path of somebody. The search that led to your hiring, I'd been looking for a worship pastor for about 2 years. And I had interviewed several people, you know, just as they would come to me, but I never solicited resumes. I never advertised for the position. I just trusted that the Lord had a person that would not only have the qualifications, but would fit the chemistry of our team and our church. And so being patient in that process, I've learned that patience is a good thing because God does make it work.
Yeah.
And you'd rather have the right person after what you think is a delay than have the wrong person because you wanted to plug somebody in. Back to the silo question, we can take our time because the team that we have put together here is kind of like drafting the best athlete available.
Yeah.
And so when we have a hole, I just realign job assignments and we cover it until we can find somebody that joins the team and can carry this portion of the load.
Yeah.
So even if we have 2 or 3 staff members, you know, openings at the same time, I have enough people, and I've hired people that have a willingness to be team players, so we just kind of redistribute responsibilities and assignments, which allows me the time to then just seek the Lord and find the right person. And we don't have any turnover here.
Yeah.
But it's because we not only hire people who know how to do their jobs, but God brings us people who fit and want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
It's really a remarkable process.
It's pretty awesome. And I just want to pause right here and just say, man, if you're a worship pastor watching this video right now, pause this video and go ask your pastor if he will watch this with you, because I think our goal in this conversation is, for one thing, for a worship pastor to submit to the authority that God has given the pastor over a church, and I want you to be able to see what a worship pastor, senior pastor relationship should look like. But also, I want pastors to hear where my pastor's coming from and see how a working relationship like this can work. And so, man, pause this video, go grab your pastor, ask if he'll watch it with you. And also, if you are enjoying this content, subscribe, hit the little bell button. That just helps you stay notified when we release a new video. But Michael, third question I want to ask is, what things or qualities were you looking for when hiring a worship pastor, and why?
Okay. Yeah.
And you don't have to brag on me. I'm just kidding.
Well, you know, the challenge of hiring a worship pastor versus most other staff positions is that the worship pastor spends a lot of time in the spotlight. I mean, I've got pastors on the team that do awesome work, but it's so behind the scenes, only the people they work with really know.
Yeah.
A worship pastor, though, has a special challenge because his heart and his mind is susceptible to pride, to arrogance, to a little bit of, believing that he's Mr. Wonderful because people tell him all the time. Mm-hmm. So when I was looking for a worship pastor and when I was praying about who God would have for us, obviously I needed musical expertise. I needed somebody that had the ability to do the job. But there's lots of people with the ability to do the job that wouldn't be right for it. Mm-hmm. I look for a heart for worship. That is, and that's kind of a trite phrase, but I mean somebody who lives and breathes, who rolls out of bed in the morning saying, how can we ascend the mountain of God mm-hmm. and worship Him? I want that to just sort of overflow from my worship pastor. But I want that heart for worship, that desire to be in the presence of God, that has to be coupled with a love for people. I've had worship pastors in other churches in years past where they loved worship, but it was a mechanical performance.
Right.
And they were interested in the expertise of the music, and they were interested in the perfection of the show, but they never gave a second thought to not just ascending the mountain, but taking the people up the mountain with them. And if you don't love people, if you don't think worship is crucial to their ability to live the Christian walk, then you can't do this job. So a heart for worship, a love for people, humility is a big thing because of the challenge of being in the spotlight. One of the things that I've tried to learn over the years is the discipline of deflection. You know, when people come up and say, oh, one of the 3 best sermons I've ever heard. I go, well, you need to get out more. You know, I mean, I try and deflect that because I don't need to fall for that.
Yeah.
And a worship pastor, you know, is often told, you know, what a glorious person he is, and he can't fall for that.
Yeah.
Because that steals your ability to ascend the mountain. I mean,
Right.
God resists the proud. He resides in the heart of the humble.
Yeah.
So there's that. Teachability, I think, is a thing. I had a worship pastor in another place years ago who knew everything. And if you didn't think he knew everything, just ask him, and he'd tell you that he knew everything. But when all of us quit being teachable, then we're stuck right where we are, and we don't make any further advance. So those are some of the kinds of things that I look for. Chemistry within our team, that's for all positions, but the worship pastor, like I said, is so upfront that I look for his heart almost more, and well, not almost, I look for his heart more than I look for his musical experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and you were talking about deflection, and I've had to learn that because, people every Sunday are where, man, that worship was awesome. And I know what they mean. I think they're just trying to encourage me, but what my common response has become is, yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I want them to know that had nothing to do with me.
We need to send that compliment to the Spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to, because I've preached more than a few times in my life where I felt like the Spirit said, okay, you're pretty comfortable. Why don't you go do this one on your own?
Yeah.
And I knew,
Yeah, it falls apart.
It falls apart, yeah.
Right.
And so we have to be conscious to give credit where credit's due. And people give credit to us, even when they mean to give it to God, but they don't know how to express that. But we can help them in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about our relationship and how we operate here. And last week, if you watched the video last week, I talked a little bit about how Michael will give me his sermon list for it's probably 2 months in advance, I guess, and it changes time to time. But what that does for me is I can look at what he's going to be preaching about, and he gives me the scripture references that he's going to be using. And what it does for me is it helps me prepare to examine the worship songs that we have in our library. And we have about 40 to 50 songs that we do. And so I'll look through that library, and I'll say, okay, he's preaching on this topic with this scripture reference. I'll go look that up and see if I can find any songs that kind of match up with that, because it can be an extremely powerful moment when what he's given me, and I've done my due diligence to prepare, it can be an extremely powerful moment when those things line up. And even, after your sermon, you may call the band back up to do an invitation or something, and because we've got songs that just match what he's talking about, it can make for an awesome moment and allow for the Spirit to do incredible things. And so, but let's just talk about our relationship. I mean, one thing that I have loved since I've been here is Michael is an available pastor. There are, and I know a lot of pastors who are not available. They are very, I don't know the word for it, but they have a closed door. And Michael has made himself very available. When I have a question or whatever, I can, if he's got his door shut in his office, I may wait until it's open. But he's made himself available to his staff, and I love that. And so, but yeah, what do you have to add to this about how we kind of operate here, and maybe just how you operate with all of your staff, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in seminary years ago, I had a music professor for that one music course that every theology student had to take, you know. And I'll never forget that he made it abundantly clear that pastors should keep their hands off worship, that the music guy was the expert, and we should just mind our business. Preach the sermon, you know, don't get in the way. And what I've discovered over the years of actually doing ministry away from the ivory tower of seminary is that it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is important for me to give you the freedom to plan and to coordinate worship. That's an area of responsibility that has been delegated to you. And selecting the songs, you know, I mean, occasionally I come to you and I say, hey, this song, I want this song on this day, you know. But basically, I'm pretty hands-off about that. But yet, through the sermon, through the text, you know, since the proclamation of the Word is for us the central act of worship, mm-hmm. that should define what you do, the building of everything around that. Mm-hmm. And it's not that the music part is just sort of a warm-up or an introduction to the sermon. Every piece of what we do in worship is an important part, but there's this thread that runs through it all, mm-hmm. and when it works, it works great.
Yeah.
You asked me one day about a biblical basis for this. In 1 Chronicles chapter 25, that's where we see David, who his handprint, his fingerprints were all over the worship experience that the nation was having. He was planning, he was in on it, but he had selected musicians, and then he empowered them to do their part of the process. And really, when a pastor is overly controlling of worship, it really, I think, hinders the ability of the Spirit to move. But when a pastor is too laissez-faire, too hands-off, it leaves the guy that's doing the planning just kind of pulling stuff out of thin air because he doesn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. But when you know what I'm doing and you're praying and seeking the Spirit and you put it together, then when it comes together, people don't go, man, Zach and Michael did a great job. They go, look what God did here, because it just flows. And that's what we're always shooting for.
And you and I, we don't meet regularly to talk about the worship services, but you know, one thing I've really loved, and this sounds weird to say, but I have really loved our every week Tuesday staff meetings, because it helps the whole team get on the same page. And you know, I've been in churches where we didn't have staff meetings, and you know, I think it really helps your staff be on the same page. It helps the unity of the staff, because once a week you're getting together with each other, and I love our staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you know, and
blessed.
it's about communicating information, but it's also about team building. And I know there are people that are listening that don't have, you know, a staff the size of ours.
Right.
But all the way back in my first church years ago, I was a pastor, and I had a part-time seminary student who did music and youth. Well, every Saturday morning when he would come out for the weekend, every Saturday morning, we had a pool table in the youth area, and we would shoot pool for about 3 hours, and that was our staff meeting. And we talked through stuff, and some of it was church related, some of it was logistics for planning, and some of it was just becoming friends so that we were always on the same page.
Right.
So even if you're talking about a staff of a pastor and maybe one other person, the process of building that team and sharing the same vision, it's the same. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd like to do just to close this out is could you just talk to the camera and speak to senior pastors who may be watching this video and just pour your heart out to them and because I want them to see. I mean, I know pastors who go through worship pastors all the time, and some of it is that I think worship pastors can kind of see. If they're at a small church, they can kind of see that as a stepping stone to get to the next big church. And I want to speak to worship pastors right now and just say, be where you are, be invested where you are. God has put you there for a reason. And if we're constantly looking for the next step, the next stepping stool, that you've got the wrong heart anyways. Because you need to be invested where God has put you now. And so if you could just speak to senior pastors and just tell them what you would tell them.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. But before I do that, I want to say one of the questions that we talked about when I interviewed you, Zach is a marvelous musician and really could be a professional performer. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. And he had done quite a bit of that before he came to us, but he was at a place in his life where he felt God was saying, I want you to do what you do for me, but I want you to do it from the church. And one of my questions was, okay, is this on your way somewhere, or are you interested in planting your life? And that's what you've done. And you've already outlasted 90% of worship pastors in America.
Well, I was just talking about that with one of the guys on our staff. The average tenure of a worship pastor is 18 months. And so, man, I just want to encourage worship pastors, first of all, to I think there's this thing, the reason why there's so much butting of heads with senior pastors and worship pastors is because worship pastors have such an ego, for one thing. But man, just the idea of we have lights on the stage, there's so much into production and all this stuff that we can get excited about and let become the central idea of being a worship pastor. And so forget about all that. Like, remember that you are there to lead people to worship the God of the universe. Like, the lights don't matter, the stage doesn't matter, the stage design doesn't matter, none of it matters. All you're there for is to worship our God. And so I think that's where sometimes worship pastors can go wrong, is because they are looking for the spotlight.
Well, they think that the key to what they do is that performance in the moment, when the reality is the performance in the moment is nothing unless the hidden, isolated prayer time during the week has happened.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, well, yeah, I love talking to senior pastors. It's one of the things that I do, and I would just say a couple of things. One is that really it's the responsibility of the senior pastor to a great degree to facilitate a solid relationship with his staff, particularly with the worship pastor. You are not in competition with each other. If the people love your worship pastor, that's no threat to you. Man, I put people in place, and frankly, as a senior pastor, I occasionally get blamed for things that's not my fault, but I get credit for a lot of things that I had nothing to do with. And so, you put people in place and you nurture them and you help them be better. And the benefit for the senior pastor will come back, multiple times over. But people won't be fooled. If a worship pastor and a senior pastor are not together, the people know. You can't be at odds. Don't treat your worship pastor like he's a junior minion and you've just thrown a bone in his direction. All of our pastors are pastors, whatever their job assignment. And I think presenting that to the people is a critical element. When you elevate the status of your team in the eyes of your people, it strengthens the church because it gives them confidence in the people. You should pray with your staff. You should mentor your staff. Honestly, I think senior pastors miss the boat sometimes because they hire people and then kind of just send them off, and they never come back around to make sure that their souls are in good condition. If you want to strengthen your church, strengthen your team. And if you want to keep a worship pastor, don't have a philosophy that every Sunday is Super Bowl Sunday. You will burn out a worship pastor if he has to put a bigger and better performance every Sunday in place. But if you let him share life with the people, if you let him lead the people up the mountain of God, if you make his service here a place where his family is nurtured, when you build him up instead of wear him down, listen, the benefit for the church, the benefit for the pastor's ministry, it's huge.
Yeah, I love that. And you do that. And this is not just something he's spouting out. This is something that he actually does, and he lives this out. And so, Michael, thanks for joining us. Listen, if you are liking this content, please comment in the comment section below. We want to know what topics you want us to cover and what you're struggling with as a worship pastor. So comment in the comment section below. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.